Hi everyone, welcome to our last scholarship workshop. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this is actually our last month together. Well, not really together, just as part of your ambassador training program before you become fully fledged ambassadors and will hopefully join our network of scholarship mentors, which we will be establishing. And yeah, so this month really wraps up what we've been doing for the past 5 months. It's a little bit of a recap, and it really focuses on how you can put everything that you've learned so far into practice in terms of advising other young people, scholarship seekers, scholarship applicants, students, and just generally people in and from Africa looking for scholarships. So as you know, the big project this month is actually your case study, where you will be advising an actual scholarship seeker. As you know, we are currently running a competition. We've already received over 100 applications, and I'm sure that we will have at least 200 on our books by the end of the application period. So super, super exciting. And please keep sharing the Facebook posts and the LinkedIn posts because yeah, that's really how we reach more people who we can then support through our scholarship mentor program. So without further ado, let us jump into this month's lecture, which will really prepare you for the case study and give you a little bit of a guideline in terms of how to approach the case study. But we will also be providing you with further guidelines, a few templates, which I will explain in more detail during the workshop. So let's jump in. Very excited. And as you can see, we really have reached the final month now. And so it's really all about becoming a scholarship mentor or scholarship advisor, how to go about it, where to get started, and how does everything that we've learned so far really tie in. So this is the structure of today's workshop. So we just look at, what does it actually mean to be a scholarship mentor in the framework of Africademics? How do you prepare for the first consultation with a scholarship mentee? How do you assist them in finding the right scholarship? And how do you offer advice on an application? Because those are really the two areas where you will be assisting people. Usually it's either someone looking for a scholarship, so then you'll be guiding them through the process of actually finding one, or you have someone who is already or who has already found a scholarship that they wish to apply for, or you have assisted them in finding one, and then it's really all about the application process. And then at the end, we'll have a few do's and don'ts, just a few tips and tricks before we wrap up and head straight into our exciting case study. So what does it mean to be an Africademic scholarship mentor? So it's really all about offering guidance and mentorship for scholarship seekers and applicants, really practical, hands-on, assisting them in that process, and also really supporting applicants in making a bit of a self-assessment. What is it that they really need? What kind of scholarship do they need or do they want? Do they have the necessary qualifications? Are they actually eligible for the kind of scholarship that they want? And if not, then what other opportunities are out there? So it's also really about giving them a bit of a reality check based on your own knowledge and based on what you've learned. Because as we know, not everybody is familiar with the scholarship landscape and the requirements and the hard work that has to go into getting one of those. So your first step is really to provide that reality check and to figure out what is realistic and feasible for that particular applicant. And then in more practical terms, you can also advise on timing of applications, when to get started, how long does it take, where can I find scholarship information, what's a quality application in terms of the documents submitted, and what other facts and figures and information should you consider if you're looking for a scholarship. Now, the requirement to join our team at the moment, the team that we are now establishing coming out of our training program, is to have successfully completed the ambassador training program. As you may have noticed, a few of the people who were initially with us have already dropped out simply because the workload was too high, or they realized they couldn't commit to the extent that we would have needed them to. And that's okay. And it just also makes you guys stand out because you are still here. You have been completing your challenges and your monthly assignments and your workshop. And that's a really amazing feat considering all the other things that you are juggling on the side. So congratulations on having it made thus far. And I'm super excited that you are here. And I really can't wait to take this to the next level with all of you. Now, going forward, once we have completed your program and in around October, November, we will be offering a special page or a special section on the Africademics website where people can then submit their requests. Quite similar to what we've been doing now with the Google form. So that was a bit of a trial run for that. Going forward, we will get regular requests from people looking for scholarships, looking for help. And then on probably a monthly basis, we will put those out to you and then try and, depending on how your availability and your capacity looks like, regularly team you up with a new mentee that you can assist. And I think it's really also about being part of a growing global community, sharing your own knowledge, but also continuing to learn more about scholarship. Because obviously, with every person that you advise, you also expand your own knowledge. You will find new scholarships. You will learn more about the application process and also about mentorship and giving guidance in general. And of course, for you, that is also a possibility to boost your own CV and your own experience portfolio through being a volunteer for Africademics. And going forward, we are also really planning to offer a little bit more in terms of training opportunities for the ambassador, potentially through collaborations with other organizations as well. So being part of that network will obviously give you first-hand access to that as well. Now, getting started. This is what you will be doing basically next week. So obviously, before you dive in and really offer that support, you will prepare for that first meeting or that first consultation with your new mentee. And the first step, as I'm sure that's probably what you would have done anyway, is to really review the candidate's profile and to get a first impression of who they are, what's their background, what are their strengths, and to really focus on their education and qualifications, because obviously that's very relevant for the scholarship. Which field of study are they in? What level of study are they at? Which degrees have they completed? Also, what's their nationality? Because as you know, a lot of scholarships are only open to people from a certain country. And also, what are their needs and wishes? What is it that they want to apply for? And you will get that information from that form that we developed together. And based on that, you can then make a first assessment, identify potential opportunities, see where that applicant's strengths are. Maybe you can already think of a specific scholarship that they might qualify for, but also be on the lookout for potential red flags. Things like, not having such amazing grades, or having a big gap in your CV. Or maybe you realize that that person is in a really narrow field of study and wants to pursue a very specific topic. And there might not necessarily be a scholarship for that particular thing. So also kind of make a little list of those red flags or of those potential obstacles that you identify in your first assessment. And then also do a quick scholarship search using those portals that we all know, like I've listed them in the one scholarship workshop, but After School Africa, scholarship positions, the ESSA scholarship database, and so on and so forth. And just do a little pre-check and see what comes up. Just so that you also have a few scholarships that you can already suggest to the candidate, just based on the very basic information, like their field of study, their nationality, and so on and so forth. And once you've done that, once you've done the prep work, that's when you contact the candidate, you introduce yourself. We will provide a little template for that, kind of like an email template, because obviously you're also doing this on behalf of Africademics. So we also want to make sure that we have a, consistent communication with the people that we support. And what you do with that first contact is obviously to suggest the date and time for a call. There might obviously be a little bit of back and forth to find a suitable time, but the point of that first contact is really the introduction, and then to set up a probably won't be in person, but a virtual meeting or a call. And when you're getting ready for the call, then you will obviously have the candidate's profile ready. Either you'll have it printed out next to you or you have it on your computer screen. And also your prep notes that you've made, kind of those red flags, potential opportunities, and so on. And yeah, and that's it, I think. And then in terms of, yeah, what do you really then cover in that first call or in that first meeting? Once again, as we always do, when we have a meeting, you start with your introduction, obviously introduce yourself, what you do on a personal level, your educational background, your role as Africademics ambassador, and give the candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. Obviously, you've read their profile, but it's always nice to do a little formal round of introductions and hear what they have to say about themselves. Then it's also quite important to once again clarify the purpose of this consultation. Now, we have stated this in the description of the competition that we're running, that, you know, you are not promising them to get a scholarship. What you are do is really just to offer guidance and advice based on your personal knowledge, based on your experience, based on the course that you've done to become an ambassador. And you're doing so as a volunteer. You are not paid staff that an applicant can demand things from. And I think that's also important for you to keep that in mind, because you are doing this in a voluntary capacity. And if you see that somebody is not really appreciating your efforts, then there's also no obligation for you to continue bombarding them with help and with information, because it's supposed to be a mutually positive relationship that you have with your mentee, right? In terms of the expectations, I think that's also important that you lay that out at the beginning. You and the mentee or the scholarship candidate should have a regular, you know, line of communication. You should check in every 1 or 2 weeks over the next. It's always a bit difficult to say how long a mentee-mentor consultation relationship will last. It might be, you know, very quick. Maybe the person finds a scholarship very quickly and applies the next month, and then that's it. Or maybe you might go through a longer period of advising them, helping them boost their resume, helping them look for scholarships. Maybe they need to wait until the next year because they haven't finished their degree. So depending on how long that takes, how long that period will be. But I think to check in every 1 or 2 weeks is a good and feasible timeline. And the candidate is also expected to be proactive. So obviously what you'll be doing in those consultations, in those regular calls and check-ins, is really to provide them with information as to what they should be doing and where they should be looking. And then they are also expected to deliver. So at the end of each meeting, the two of you should agree on an outcome or a milestone that the candidate should achieve by the time you meet for the next time or you have your next call. And they are expected to also deliver on that. And I know I've said this many times, but I'll say it again, it's not your task, or it's not your responsibility to do the hard work for them. Anybody who wants to get a scholarship is expected to put in the hard work. So you're really just there to guide them through that process, but you are not there to do the searching and write the application for them. Then in terms of the first steps, as I said earlier, there are 2 types of candidates or mentees generally. You will either proceed to what will be section A in this presentation, which is how to assist people in finding scholarships, or to section B, which is then how to assist with application for a specific scholarship. And I'll also provide more guidance on that in the notes for the case study. But I think what's also really important to already do in that first consultation, to really do that reality check, to have a chat with the candidate, and also once again ask them to outline what are they looking for, what are their expectations or their wishes in terms of funding, and then explain that little pre-assessment that you've made, the things that you flagged, the things that you feel that stand out, and to really work out, is what the candidate wants realistic, obviously in a nice and polite way. But if somebody wants a scholarship to Harvard and they are clearly not performing academically and they don't have any kind of volunteer engagement and they also don't really look particularly motivated, then it doesn't mean that they're not eligible for anything, but it's also important to be realistic about what can be achieved and what not. So with that candidate, you might perhaps be looking at doing a summer course with a scholarship or a short course with a scholarship, right? And also keep in mind that if the first option is not realistic or doesn't work out, there are usually alternatives. So rather than saying, okay, this is not going to work out, try chatting about what other avenues they could explore. Think back to those different types of scholarships that we spoke about, and just see where could the candidate fits in. Even if it's a smaller program, even if it's something that takes another year, that's fine. It's not a quick process. This is part of someone's long-term career planning. So if it takes longer, if it's a bit more complicated, that's fine, no problem. So part A, finding the right scholarship or opportunity for someone, or rather assisting them in doing so. As I said, it really starts with assessing the needs and wishes that someone has against the actual eligibility for a scholarship. So remember what we did in workshops 1 or 2, which was the different types of scholarships, but also where to find them and eligibility criteria, right? So if you don't remember it, might be good to go back and watch those videos again. And it really starts with what are they looking for? What field of study are they in? What level of study are they at? Are they at master's, PhD, undergrad? What level of funding do they need? Are they able to contribute to some extent, or do they really need a full scholarship that covers everything? Or do they maybe have access to other sources of funding that can cover part of their expenses, and are they only looking for something that covers their living cost, for example? So also assess the degree or the level, as I said, of funding. Are they looking to study in a specific country? Do they want to go to a particular university? Is it a particular course that they want to do? But also chat to them and find out how flexible they are. Because as we know, there are only so many scholarships out there. Some of them are quite specific, some of them are very broad. So if someone is really serious about getting funding, then they might also have to be a little bit flexible and compromise on some of the things that they want. For example, maybe they want to study in the US, but maybe there simply are no scholarships in their field of study. So then, okay, would you be open to studying in Germany or in Italy, for example, right? Or when to start. Maybe somebody really wants to start this year, but they're already super late in the process and they've really missed most of the deadlines. So then can you make a backup plan to do something else until next year and use that time to perhaps gain work experience while simultaneously applying for other scholarships, right? And then, as I said earlier, really do that assessment of strengths and weaknesses together with the candidate as well. So look at their academic performance, their professional experience, volunteer work that they've done. Also some of their personal characteristics, gender, disability, nationality, and I'm mentioning that because, as you know, those are often criteria for specific scholarships. So someone who is female might have access to different kinds of scholarships as a male applicant, right? Or there are scholarships that are specifically for people with disabilities or of a certain nationality. So those are things that you need to consider. And then based on this, as I said, what's realistic? What are we really looking for? Or what kind of scholarship should we be looking for? Can this person qualify for a fully funded undergrad or postgrad scholarship? Or should we maybe look at a niche scholarship? You know, there are those smaller programs that are maybe just offered by a specific university or in a specific field. Or should we rather say, okay, I don't think that this year you can qualify for that big Rhodes scholarship or whatever it is that you want to apply for. So let's look at how we can build your CV so that it looks better next year. So let's see if we can get you into a short course, or if we can get you into a leadership academy, or if there are competitions that you can participate in, so that then you can add to your portfolio as a candidate, and then perhaps next year you are more likely to be eligible for one of those bigger programs. And as I said, as a reminder, I think that's also something that's important for you to remind your mentee of, that getting a scholarship, it's a process, right? And it's often a long process. It's not a quick thing that happens within a few weeks. You really need determination and you really need to stay on the ball. And scholarship seekers must be willing to invest the time and the energy that's needed. They must do their research, and possibly they might also be required to work on themselves and to take a few extra steps in order to become that great scholarship candidate. And that's okay, because it's a long-term investment in your future. So if it takes a year longer, in 10 years' time, nobody will ask that question even. So then once you figured out what kind of scholarship you are looking for with your mentee, we come to what we did in workshop number 3, which is where to find scholarships. As you know, there are many different sources and many different platforms. And your first step is really to inform the candidate about all those different platforms. We will prepare an info sheet for you, which you can then simply give to the candidate, that will list all the main platforms for scholarship seekers. So they can then just work their way through that. But it's also good, as you said, as I said earlier, to already have a few examples of scholarships ready, just the ones that you found in a very preliminary search that you did, whatever that might be for that particular candidate. And yeah, as I said, really share that info sheet with the applicant. Perhaps also, go to one of those scholarship databases together, do a quick search, see if there is an opportunity, chat about it. Sometimes people also just need someone to walk through those steps with them and to just assist and, show them, okay, this might be a good one. Maybe try that different filter to get better results. So also just for you to be familiar with those different databases and scholarship portals is really helpful. And then once you've done that as part of your first search, then, as I said, at the end of each call or at the end of each session, make sure that you agree on a way forward. Agree on a date for the next check-in, might be in a week's time, might be in 2 weeks' time, and also agree on the steps that the candidate needs to do until then. So they are, in most cases, expected to do a search. And my recommendation is tell them to find at least 3 suitable opportunities for them, opportunities that they qualify for, that, where they meet the eligibility criteria. Even if they're not currently open for applications, that's okay. But simply to identify those opportunities, and for your next call, they should bring at least 3 to the table that you guys can then discuss and go through together. And obviously at the end, always ask, do you have any additional questions? Is there anything else that you want to chat about? Is anything unclear? Even if it's not directly related to scholarship, sometimes that's also a nice opportunity to build a bit of a relationship with your mentee. Maybe they're struggling with something at university, and maybe you can give a few minutes of advice on that as well. So then when you are guiding scholarship seekers, those are just a few, I would say, common sense tips and tricks. So first step, always be prepared. That's really the main thing. As I said, review the profile, do a quick pre-search, do your own little reality check for the candidate, and have your notes ready for the call, because being prepared is literally 50% of the work already done. I'm German, so I like to be prepared, but it's really, I think, really literally half the work is preparation. But also remember that, you're not expected to know it all. Like, you are not a dictionary, you are not a scholarship database, you're not a scholarship guru. Whatever advice you can give will always be based on what you've experienced and what you know, and nobody knows everything. So that's perfectly okay, right? Make use of the resources that you have to continue learning and to complement what you already know. Look at those scholarship platforms, look at those databases, look at the weekly Africademics news flash, which I hope you are all getting via email, because that's also a great list of scholarships that are currently open for applications. So maybe there's something in there for your mentee, right? And also review the course materials, go back to previous workshops, and use the WhatsApp. We are in this together. You are not expected to go through everything by yourself. And I think, as you know, your fellow ambassadors and myself, we are always happy to answer questions or to provide advice, even on, specific questions that you might be struggling with your mentee. And this is just something that I've sometimes even seen in myself, where we sometimes have the tendency to encourage or almost push people to apply for something that we know very well, our own scholarship program, the one that we've been a part of. And sometimes we then overlook that there might be other opportunities out there that could be better suited for that particular candidate. So unless you really see this is a great match between this particular person and that scholarship program that I know very well, rather do the extra work and see if there isn't something out there that's a better fit. Because sometimes we get a little bit, blinded by the things that we know and by the things that we think are amazing, like our own scholarship program. And then we forget that there might be other opportunities out there that are better suited for other people. And last but not least, it's not your job to do the legwork. It's really your job to guide others in that process. So that was quick intro to part A, helping people find scholarships. The next step for someone who has now found an opportunity they want to apply for, or obviously for someone who already comes to you and says, hey, I want to apply for the DAAD scholarship, or I want to apply for that specific scholarship at the University of Cape Town, for example. That in a way makes it easier for you because you can skip that step where you help them find a scholarship. But at the same time, it's obviously also a slightly more demanding part of the process. So in terms of advising others on the application, I think that's all still relatively fresh in your minds because that's literally what we did in the past month or two. Now, in terms of application documents, as you know, the first step is just to really go through the requirements in great detail. Go through the list of application documents and just make sure you understand the process and what is needed and what is required, and make sure that the applicant understands it as well. And then you go through those documents or the steps in the process and really just briefly discuss each of them with the candidate. So in terms of the documents, if it's something that they must provide, do they already have it? Is that, your degree certificate, for example, because you may have someone who has graduated, but they don't have the degree certificate, but they need to submit it as part of the application. So ask, are they already in possession of that document, or do they first need to procure it from somewhere? Is the document recent? Does it have to be a recent document? For example, a reference letter, it's not really useful if you have a reference letter, but it's from 2015 and it needs to be from this year. And also, does it comply with all the requirements for that particular document? For example, for copies, does it need to be a certified copy, or is a simple copy enough? Is it a document that they first have to request from some institution? Or is it a document that needs to be translated from their mother tongue, for example? And if that is the case, also try and get an indication as to how long that will take. Where does the person have to get it from? Because that will obviously impact your whole timeline in terms of the application. And then after the main documents have been, evaluated, is there anything in addition to that the candidate could submit or that the candidate would like to submit? And also take a quick look at those documents. And if there's anything that is outstanding, not outstanding in the sense that it's awesome, but outstanding in the sense it's still missing, then make a to-do list together with your applicant where you list the individual steps that they need to take to obtain each of those documents that are still missing, including hopefully the dates by which they will have it. And as I said, the individual steps, like go to your university's registrar's office and inquire about getting a copy of your degree certificate that is translated into English. And then if they tell you there's a 2-week waiting period, then you also make a note of that in your checklist, for example. Now, this is my favorite part, as you probably recall from the workshop, the formatting requirements. Now, recap workshop number 5. As you know, there's a whole section on how to format those documents. If you have scans, make sure it's high definition, ideally in color, make sure the margins are correct, have it in PDF format, not in JPEG or anything else. And check if it needs to be translated or certified. Then your reference letters, how many are needed, from what kind of person are you going to get them? is there a letter of admission required for that particular scholarship? And if that is the case, then you will need to include the university application in your planning as well, right? And even if the letter of admission is not included, and I think this is a really, really key part, to always keep reminding your mentee that they can't just apply for the scholarship without applying simultaneously to probably several universities, right? I mean, the scholarship application, it's one part and it's important, but obviously we still need to get the person into university. And as we know, universities and courses are also competitive, especially at postgrad level. So in addition to that scholarship search and application process that you are guiding them with, they also need to make sure that they have their university applications going and that they keep an eye on those deadlines as well. Now, your CV, we've gone through that. Make sure it's the correct length, see if they should or shouldn't include a picture, check the formatting, make sure it's all nice and consistent, make sure all the contact details are there, and make sure the content is relevant and nicely structured. And then also, yeah, our letter of motivation, that will probably be the biggest piece of work, and also the one where it's not so easy to provide very clear guidelines because it's such a personal thing. But as we covered in last month's workshop, and we also provided additional materials, make sure it's well structured, the different sections are there, make sure it really brings out what makes the candidate special as a person, add to what's already stated in the CV, be specific and substantiate your statements with evidence from your CV or from their personal life. And share resources and templates with the candidate. We will also have a little checklist or info sheet on that, but as you know, there are also lots of resources out there, and we've already shared a few in last month's scholarship workshop. Have a look at the Google Drive. I think you all have access to it, and use those resources because they are really quite useful. Now, when you provide feedback on a candidate's CV, this is also something that you should now be very familiar with because you've all done it in last month's case study. Once again, it's really also just about going through that checklist. Does it meet the requirements as per the application instructions? Is everything relevant really there? Is the formatting consistent? Are all those little details covered? Are the personal details and contact information complete? Sometimes people don't put their nationality or their date of birth, or there's a typo in the email address, which is the worst thing ever because then people will contact you, but it goes to the wrong address. So just check all those little things. And also make sure that those additional achievements and prizes and volunteer experience are there. And also check if the references, if their details must be included in the CV, or if you can make that upon request to save a little bit of space at the end. As I said, picture really depends on the country. In Germany, for a German foundation, you would add one. In the US and other countries, maybe not. And once again, ask them once they're done with their formatting and everything to convert it to a PDF, and just double check that the formatting and spacing appears as it should and that nothing has changed. In terms of providing feedback on a letter of motivation, once again, you should be very familiar with this since you also did it last month. And I think it's quite similar just in terms of working through those requirements, right? Is it well structured? Does it really touch on all these points that are listed here? Does it meet formal requirements? Is it not too long, not too short? Is it nicely divided into paragraphs? And also don't forget to add that headline, add the date, add the salutation, dear professor, what. Thank you very much for your time and consideration, sign it. It's just those little details that make it look a lot more appealing and professional. And as I said last month, it's really to make it personal and to not just use those old phrases like, no, I'm a great team player and I'm very dedicated. No, it's really what makes you stand out as a person. What have you achieved? What do you want to achieve? And why do you really want the scholarship? And and as I said, those empty generic claims, reviewers read them 200 times a day and you basically don't even read it properly anymore. It's really about saying, okay, yeah, I'm a great team player and I'm very dedicated, but you can say, yeah, my time growing up in challenging circumstances has taught me that it's important to always be considerate and helpful and collaborate with others. And in addition, my internship at the university's admission office has taught me to be well organized and always on time. So just always substantiate whatever claims that you make. And I think I also mentioned this last month, it's always a good idea to go through the scholarship description, identify some of the key words that come out when they describe the ideal candidate, and to then work them into your letter of motivation, because that just kind of shows that connection between you and that scholarship. And it also shows that you've done your research, you know who they're looking for, and you're really aiming to show that you are that person, or that your mentee is that person in your case. Yeah, I think those are really the basics. In terms of the do's and don'ts, so those are, yeah, just a few tips and tricks for you. In terms of the do's, I think it's really, really key to set out a bit of a framework right at the beginning with your mentee. Figure out what's your preferred means of communicating with them. Are you happy to communicate via WhatsApp, or do you want to keep it in a more, let's say, professional space, and you say, no, we communicate via email? Because the thing is also, once you give out your WhatsApp to your mentee, then they will contact you at times when it's maybe not so convenient for you. And then you might look at the message, you're like, okay, I'll reply later, but then other messages come in and you forget, and so on and so forth. At least that's what happens to me, because I use WhatsApp a lot for work. And it's sometimes very difficult, because unlike your email inbox that you look at and then you go through it email by email and you reply to them, with your WhatsApp, it's all a bit muddled up, and then there's your friends in there, and then there's your mentee in there. Of course, it's quicker. Of course, it's easier for a lot of people who don't have regular access to the emails. At the same time, I always feel that, if you are serious about applying for a scholarship and about studying, then you will have to make sure that you have an email address and that you monitor it regularly in any case, if you are a scholarship applicant, because your university and your scholarship application, they're not going to chat to you on WhatsApp, right? They will communicate with you via email. So, the fact that you might insist on communicating with them via email, in a way, that's also a little bit of a test, or an opportunity for your mentee to also get used to that means of communication, and to maybe also work a little bit on the email etiquette. Because what I also see a lot is, people not really writing professional emails, but writing emails like they write a WhatsApp message. And maybe that's then also something that you can point out to your mentee and just alert them to the fact that, hey, when you send that application email to your professor, it's important that you follow a certain structure and that you use proper capitalization and proper salutations and so on. But yeah, back to this. As I said, agree on your preferred means of communication, and it's really something that you can determine. And possibly also time. You can tell your mentee, look, I'm generally available from 5 p.m. because before that I'm at work, so I will not be able to respond at that time. And also, when you've set a meeting, it's always good to just check in and confirm the meeting on the day before, because people do forget, and you don't want to be sitting there all ready for your meeting and then turns out your mentee has forgotten. Obviously, that's very bad manners if they do that, but it does happen. So it's always good for you to just check in on the previous day, tell them, hey, just a reminder, we're meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you. Then, also at the end of your meetings, remind them about the next date on which you would be checking in with them. And even though obviously the applicant themselves are supposed to keep an eye on deadlines for the scholarships or universities they want to apply for, it's also always a good idea to check those every now and then, and to remind your mentee, hey, you really need to hurry up now. You only have 3 weeks left until the deadline, and you still need this and this and this and this document. Sometimes people also just need to be pushed a little bit in order to meet those deadlines. And I think, that's, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but I just did want to mention that as much as you are obviously advising based on your personal experience, you also represent Africademics in this process of being a scholarship mentor. So just keep that in mind when it comes to communicating. Be professional, be polite, because obviously what you say and how you conduct yourself also reflects on Africademics as an organization. And I said this earlier, guys, if you don't have the answer to something, that's okay. Be honest about it. You don't have to come up with what you think might be true. You can literally say, look, I actually don't know the answer to this question, but let me look it up for you, or let me ask my fellow ambassadors and get back to you. And I think that's not just in Africademics, that's something in academia in general that I feel often struggle with, especially when we're surrounded by lots of very smart people like our professors and our fellow researchers and colleagues, that we feel that we have to know everything. But to be honest, I've seen how much people value that openness, where you can just admit, hey, I don't know the answer to this particular question, but I'll look it up. I'll go back to my notes, or I'll find that out for you and I'll get back to you. And as I said, you can always ask me or your fellow ambassadors for advice. And I think you can also encourage the applicant to reach out to the Scholarship Foundation or to the university, right? Because they will know best. If it's a question about a particular scholarship or particular detail, then there are other people who are experts on this and whose job it is to answer questions like that. So also don't be shy to refer them, to other sources of information. It's not just all on you. It really isn't. And then, as I also mentioned, I think last month, it's not just up to you to give feedback on application documents. You should really, as part of your engagement with your mentee, really encourage them to look around in their own network and to find other people that they can get feedback from, just to get a different perspective and a different point of view, but also just mentioning to them that the people they get feedback from should be qualified. It shouldn't just be your study buddy, but it just should actually be someone who ideally is a little bit higher up in the ranks and who knows what they're talking about when they provide feedback. And as I also said last month, encourage your mentee to also be selective when adopting feedback. I think a lot of the time people are so intimidated almost by the feedback that they get, and then you just adopt everything regardless of whether or not it really makes sense in that context. So also just encourage them to think critically about the feedback that they receive, and also encourage them to share feedback that they've received from other people with you, and you guys can discuss it together. You can, part of you guiding them can also be guiding them to in terms of what to do with feedback that they receive from other people. And I think being a scholarship mentor or a scholarship advisor is really to also really help your mentee find the balance between the big dreams, because we should all dream big, right? We should all reach for the stars, but at the same time also be realistic about what is out there and what out of those many things that are out there can I apply for at this point in time, just as my next step. If I don't qualify for something now, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to qualify in 5 years. So I'll just work harder towards that and take smaller steps and use those other little stepping stones and other opportunities. Now, in terms of the don'ts, I have already said this so many times, so I'm not going to say it again, but just, don't do all the work for them. Rather, help them find a way to do the hard work of finding and applying for scholarships themselves. At the same time, guys, don't put pressure on yourself in the sense that I have now advised this person, so if they don't get the scholarship, then I have failed as an advisor. Whether or not someone succeeds in their application is entirely out of your hands. We don't know who they're up against. We don't know what the selection committee or who the selection committee is looking for. We really cannot influence that. All we can do is help someone put together the best possible application based on what we can offer them, and then the rest is out of your hands. So always keep that in mind. Do your best, give the best possible advice, do whatever you can, but ultimately it's not in your hands. And then, I think I think as we move forward with this, we will probably see a lot of requests and applications for support coming in, because we're already receiving them, even though we don't formally offer this scholarship mentor program yet. So there's definitely a huge need out there. So once we launch this, once people can apply through the website, there will be a lot of requests coming in. And obviously, we will not necessarily be able to assist every single one of them. That's unfortunate, but every person that we can assist is already one more than without Africademics. But also, guys, don't take on more mentees or more cases than you can handle. As much as you may want to assist many, many people, sometimes it's better to provide quality advice to one person or two persons, rather than taking on 10 mentees and then not really being able to offer quality support to any of them. So I'm a big fan of quality over quantity. And if you say, I'm just going to take on one person and work with them for however long they need me, then that's fine. If you're someone who says, okay, I want a new mentee every month and this is fun and I'm loving this and I really want, to have different people and work with them, that's also fine. You need to figure out what works for you. And based on that, take on as many or as few mentees as you can and want. And yeah, I think this is really the last point, but still the most important one for me. This is really a group effort, right? We can all learn from each other in this process. I think if you're struggling with something, then one of your fellow ambassadors is very likely to be struggling with that as well. So, share your successes, but also share your struggles. Ask questions to your fellow ambassadors, ask questions to me if you want. And really use the WhatsApp group as a forum to bounce ideas off each other and to share your experiences with your mentees, be it good or bad, because that will also help us improve our system, right? We are also learning as we go along. So if we know what you are struggling with or what your mentees are struggling with, then we can also improve our support structure in response to that. So the more we know, the better we can also support you and support others going forward. This is just a little repeat slide. I think you remember that from last month when we spoke about applications. I've just put it in here as a little reminder so that you can also access it when you download the presentation from the Google Drive. And that's it for today. So the next steps in terms of our last exciting month together, you will have a quiz as always. Please complete it by the end of this week. It will be shared through the usual channels. And then, as our applications for the consultations with you come in, closing on the 10th, we will do a pre-screening of all the applications submitted, just because there's always a few random ones in there where you can see, okay, people didn't really understand the purpose of this, or this is someone who we really don't think actually qualifies, but that reduced or narrowed down list of applications will be shared with you anonymously, so without people's names, just to make it fair and also comply with data protection issues. And we will share that with you by the 13th of September, so basically 3 days after the deadline. And then it will be up to you to pick the person that you want to work with for your case study. So go through the applications, go through the profiles. Ideally find someone who's in maybe your field of study or who wants to study in a country where you have studied, or who's from your home country, whatever your criteria are. But yeah, similarities are always good, just because it's easier for you to relate to them and to them, for them to relate to you. And let us know which candidate you've selected via the WhatsApp group. They will be numbered. So you just post there, I will be working with candidate number, whatever, because obviously only one of you can work with one candidate. So first come, first serve. Once an applicant is taken, they obviously can't be taken by another ambassador. And then by the 20th of September, we expect you to make a first contact with your mentee based on that template that we will share with you. You contact them via email, introduce yourself, and then start discussing a suitable date and time for your first meeting with them. And then you go through that preparation process that I outlined earlier in the presentation. You should aim to have that first call completed by the 30th of September. So it's, 10 days between your first contact and that call. I think that's relatively realistic. And then you will be asked to provide feedback on that first call through an online form, which we'll also share a bit closer to the time. Because obviously that's also important for us to know what's the outcome of that first call, what did you struggle with, what went well, so that we can build that into our program going forward. And after that, in October, early October, we will also have a little feedback session to obviously reflect on how things are going with your first mentees. Very exciting. And guys, then you are actually ready to graduate. Can you believe it? I will share more info on how that's going to go. We will also, as you know, have our Ambassador of the Year. There will be a prize. So there's a few exciting things coming up next month, which I will share with you a little bit closer to the time. But for now, we can, I think, all be excited about your first mentorship experience, which is coming up very, very soon. I will keep you posted on how our applications are coming in, and then we can get started very soon. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining for, I can't believe it, our last workshop. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure working with you and seeing you guys move through the program. I'm super excited about each and every one of you and this amazing group that we've had this year. And I think you will be the first of hopefully many, many cohorts going through the program, which will improve as we go forward. I think I've learned a lot from all of you. I hope you've also learned a lot through the sessions and through the exercises and the challenges. And I can't wait to see where this will go. I think we'll go places with our program. I think all of you will be wonderful mentors. And I think it's going to be, the start of an exciting journey where you will also continue to learn and where you will hopefully be able to support many, many others over time. Thank you so much, and we'll chat very, very soon. Bye.